Welcome to the American Staffing Association webinar, Marketing Using a GSA Schedule Contract, presented by Rick Dillon, owner and president of Dillon & Associates. I'm Emily Frabel, and I'm the Education and Webinar Coordinator for the American Staffing Association. I'll help moderate during the question and answer portion of today's webinar. Today's program is the third webinar in the ASA series, Doing Business with the Government. After you have attended this live webinar today or viewed this webinar as a course on ASA Pro, you can take an online quiz to earn an electronic certificate of completion to include when bidding for government contracts. If you have not already registered to take this quiz, send an email to asa@csp.tsc@americanstaffing.net to be registered and for more information. This program is being recorded and will be available on ASA Pro, ASA's Professional Development Center. ASA Pro has over 230 courses taught by respected industry trainers and professionals on topics from sales and business development to operations and recruiting. We have allocated time at the end of today's webinar for questions. Please feel free to send your questions in through the Q&A panel on the right as you think of them throughout the webinar. Our presenter today, Rick Dillon, is the owner and president of Dillon & Associates, a boutique consulting practice that provides strategic marketing and management advice to companies doing business with the government or aspiring to enter the federal market. He also provides corporate training and executive coaching and has served on the board of advisors of an information technology company and a marketing communications company. Rick retired in 2006 from GSA, where he managed several fee-for-service nationwide information technology programs with annual portfolios of over $200 million. Earlier in his federal career, he held executive positions in marketing and administration. Thank you for being here with us today. Rick, you now have the floor.
Thank you, Emily. First, I want to thank Emily, Tracy, and all the folks at ASA for sending me this opportunity this afternoon to talk about one of my favorite subjects, and that is marketing to the government, and specifically marketing using the GSA schedule as a tool. It's my understanding that this afternoon we have a widely diverse geographic audience, and we have participants from a variety of companies of all sizes. Therefore, what I'd like to do is keep my comments at the macro level, and at the end of the session, I'll entertain any specific questions. Just a couple of things before I start. I often use the term agencies, and I know that you folks are staffing agencies. Well, in the discussion this afternoon, when I use agencies, I will be referring to federal agencies. Another term that I use frequently in my discussions is business developer, or a BD person. So when I talk about marketing or selling, and I use the term BD or business developer, I'm referencing that person within your organization or within the vendor community that is marketing to the federal government. Next slide, please. What we're going to be discussing this afternoon are several things. We're going to start off with relationships. We're going to take a look at some various components of the market, discuss some opportunities and some tips, and we're going to wrap up the discussion about relationships as well. One of the things that is key to everything we do today is establishing a relationship. Relationships are going to be your key to success marketing to the federal government. There's just no doubt about it. Federal market, when we take a look at that this afternoon, is going to be a quick snapshot at a couple of the key numbers that have influenced what a lot of folks in the vendor community have been doing recently. Next slide, we're going to talk about marketing myths. And we're going to look at a couple of the myths and hopefully dispel them for you. There are a number of myths that circulate not only within the Beltway, but external of the Beltway in the hinterlands as it relates to marketing to the federal government. We're going to take a look at some sources of opportunity, both internal to the government and external to the government. We're going to spend some time going over a marketing checklist. And this is something that every company should have. Whether you're selling commercially or to the government or both commercially and government, B2B or B2G, a marketing checklist is something that all organizations should have. I'm going to cover the key components of a marketing checklist. We're going to start to wrap up about talking some marketing tips, some ways in which you can find information that will help you identify those target markets for you, and hopefully we'll end up in closing the business. And we'll go full cycle. We'll end where we began, talking about relationships. And when I think about marketing to the government, whether we use a GSA schedule or any other vehicle or any different venue, business development, quite frankly, is more of an art than it is a science. Next slide, please. Relationships. It's who you know that counts. There's no doubt about it. One of the things I do is I've been an adjunct college professor for 34 years here in Washington, and I've taught at a number of universities and colleges. And I tell my students regularly that the most important tool I have in my toolbox is my Rolodex. And while all of us work hard to develop our expertise and enhance our talents, no matter what we know, it's going to be of no value to us unless we can connect with the right people. So who are these right people? Well, these are the decision makers in government. Connecting with them doesn't happen overnight. And quite frankly, as you try to get to know who the decision makers are, you're going to come to realize that you're not the only one who is vying for their time. There are tons of folks out there in the contracting business and the vendor community that want to get to the same decision makers. So what I would suggest initially is use people that know people. The 6 degrees of separation type of concept. Get people who know people to introduce you, to open doors, and to get you in so you can present yourself and your organization and your products and services. One of the things that I like to tell my clients is to keep in touch. Check in on a regular basis. Stop by when you're in the building. If you're in the Department of Commerce downtown, or if you're on a military reservation in the Midwest and you have an appointment with a Jane Doe, stop by and see other folks in the facility while you're there. Obviously, to the extent that you can with security clearance, as I understand. But keep in touch. Keep in touch. I had a gentleman who represented a number of companies while I was in government, and I heard from him at least once a month. And he would call and say, "Hey, Rick, it's Ray. I'm just checking in." And when I needed information, even if I knew that Ray would not be the person that would solve the problem, I would go to Ray because of our relationship, and he would bring the right person or party to the table. So it's who you know that counts, folks. That's where it all starts. Building trust, establishing a bond, and having that loyalty which works both ways. It's also what you know. There's no doubt about it that when you get in front of a federal decision maker, then you better darn sight be the subject matter expert. They're going to rely on you to know your company, to know your products, your services, and your ability to deliver a quality product as promised. If you don't know something, tell them. Let them know that you don't have the answer readily available, and that you'll be more than glad to get back to them. Also, it's not only what you know about your company, but it's what you know about that federal agency, about that decision maker's programs, about their budgets, their funding. We'll talk a little bit more about that in just a minute. But we're asking you today not only to be an expert in your own subject matter, but be an expert in your customer's subject matter as well. I want you to demonstrate confidence. If a federal decision maker looks at a vendor and the vendor has any presence of insecurities or being ill at ease or not being confident, they'll move forward. Believe me. What you want to do is you want to make the life easier for the federal decision maker. Lord knows with all these budget cuts back we have, with the push in the current administration towards insourcing as compared to outsourcing in the previous administrations, federal decision makers are very busy with budget issues, staffing issues, programmatic issues, not even to mention the problems or the issues, I should say challenges, let me put it that way, that they have internally with their own management controls, their own compliance reporting, audits, and things of that nature. What you should do in an effort to attempt to make their life easier is talk about past performance. To the extent that you can relate with them about similar agencies, similar programs that have similar challenges, and how you have solved those challenges or problems are going to make it easier for the federal decision maker to have confidence in you. Now, another thing that we all know, and I know I'm preaching to the choir when I say this, is find common ground. Find that common denominator that will help initiate and maintain confidence. I want to share one story with you. I spent over 30 years in the volunteer fire service here in Montgomery County, Maryland. And many, many years ago, when I first joined the government, I made a call to a senior executive at the Department of Treasury. And when I was escorted into his office, I was told that he was upstairs at another meeting with an assistant secretary, and make myself comfortable, have a cup of coffee, and he'd be with me in 15 minutes. As I was sitting in his office on the first floor, 15th and Pennsylvania Avenue Northwest, I noticed over on his bookshelf, he had some appliances. And I got up and walked over there, and there were appliances used in the fire service. I won't waste your time with what they were, but they were hose type of appliances. I stood there, looked at them for a couple of minutes, walked back over and sat down. And when Dick Greenstein walked into the room, we introduced ourselves, I asked him about the appliances. And he said to me, "You must be a fireman." Old term today, it's firefighter. And I said, "I am." And I said, "You?" And he was a fire buff. For the next 45 minutes, we talked about the fire service. Needless to say, Dick became one of my best clients at GSA, all because we found a common ground when we started. And I think about Dick frequently. Unfortunately, he just passed away about a month ago. But he had a quotation that he used to use when he was out speaking at government conferences. He said, and I quote, "Come into the agency to talk, observe, and listen. Remember, don't rely only on market research data. Come into the agency." So I thought I'd introduce that today when I told my story about Dick, and I've never forgotten it. As we look at relationships, there's another quote that I've been reminded of, and I'd like you all to think about this. Price and quality will get me. How you treat me will keep me. And there's no doubt about it that when we bid on government contracts, while pricing is important and quality is hugely important, the bottom line at the end of the day is how did you treat your customers? Next slide, please. This is a snapshot of the federal market from a couple of perspectives that are important to me and, quite frankly, important to my client base these days. The majority of what I do is consulting with information technology companies who have Schedule 70. And as you can see, that is a huge budget. Last year, it was $23 billion in sales off of the schedule alone. This year's IT budget alone is approaching $80 billion. That's a lot of money. That translates to a lot of opportunities. And in fact, the government wants the vendor community to be aware of these opportunities and to be positioned so that they can compete for opportunities. I'm often asked, "Rick, can you influence a procurement?" And my answer is not only no, but heck no. But what I can do is help you position yourself so that you can compete for these opportunities. That's all we can ask, is for a fair opportunity to compete. You'll also notice the GWACs, which is the government-wide acquisition contracts, estimated at $25 billion. Full and open competition, which runs the full gamut all the way up to a competition that may take 18 to 24 months, as high as $25 billion, and other contracts at $10 billion. My recommendations to you and your organizations is to do your homework. Do your market research. Find those target markets where you have a niche and see how you can best position yourself to capitalize on those opportunities. We'll talk more of that in just a minute. Next slide, please. Throughout my government career, and more recently the last 4 years in my consulting practice, I've come across a number of myths. And I want to talk about those today and hopefully dispel some of them for you. One of them is that the government is too big for us. We're just a small business sitting out here in Northern Virginia, or sitting out here in Montgomery County, or sitting out here in Omaha, Nebraska, or wherever. It's too big, Rick. How are we going to penetrate the market? Well, it's only too big if you think it's too big. And I want to recommend that you don't impose any artificial or unrealistic limitations on what your capabilities are. Now, having said that, we must be realistic. I understand that. But segment the market. Break it down into the various components that best fit what it is you do. I suggest that you break it down by departments or agencies. Within departments and agencies, break it down into sub-agencies. We know the Department of Homeland Security has something like 22 or 26 sub-agencies. We know the U.S. Department of Agriculture, as an example, has 9 primary sub-agencies and many, many more sub-agencies. So target your market, and it will make it a lot easier. That is a myth that when you think about it, you think large numbers like we just talked about, but when you start doing market segmentation and target marketing, it makes it a lot easier and a little more palatable, quite frankly, to put together a strategic marketing plan and some tactical objectives to go after. One of the things that's necessary is pricing. Obviously, people talk about low price movements. Well, having been in the technology business, most of our acquisitions are best value. But having said that, in the staffing industry, I know that pricing for various labor categories is imperative, that you are at a place where you can compete. Competitive pricing is necessary. However, keep in mind that lowest price doesn't always win, because government decision makers look at delivery time and quality of service as well. And in staffing, we're looking at the quality of the person who is placed in that agency doing the work. Along with that line is reputation. Again, going back to the previous slide when we talked about relationships, is reputation. I'll tell you a quick story. Many years ago, when my government office was located in Northern Virginia, I had a requirement for some temps. I met a lady who worked for a staffing company in Northern Virginia. She came in, she met my requirements, sent me 2 different folks over a 2-year period, both of which I ended up hiring, one of which retired as a GS-13 and one of which is currently a GS-13. Fast forward several years, I relocated in town to GSA's central office, their headquarters. And this lady had changed staffing companies, and she shows up at my door. Lo and behold, I happen to have a requirement for a financial analyst. She placed that person for me for, I believe it was 9 months. I used her because she came to see me and because I had used her in the past and we had a relationship. Today, if she were to change staffing companies, I would follow her. So this goes back to the fact that reputation, quality of service, and how you treat me is very, very important, not just price. Just give me 6 months and we'll have our first order. Another myth. I was sitting at my desk one day, and there was a knock on my door. There was a young man, early 20s, a handsome young man, dressed in the standard uniform, dark suit, white shirt, red striped tie. And he came in, and I asked him what I could do for him. He said he was from a small business out in Indiana, small IT company, and that the owner always wanted to get a piece of the action in Washington, and he'd been sent to Washington. I asked him how long did he have before he wanted to get his first government business. And he said to me, Mr. Dillon, he said, I've got 6 months. And we had some conversation about who he knew and what vehicles he had. Of course, they had no schedules. He didn't know anyone. And my advice to him was, go home and find another job, because it ain't going to happen in 6 months. One of the biggest myths is that getting a schedule is going to make the cash register ring. And even a bigger myth is companies that sell in the commercial world, like most of you folks do, that have been very successful selling in the commercial world, and being able to close business in a very expeditious fashion. You come to the government, and you think it's going to move equally as fast. Well, unfortunately, that's not the case. I was at an IAC meeting, and I'll talk about IAC on another slide, about a year and a half ago. And I met a gentleman who was a senior vice president of a very large systems integrating company. that had a new software product, and actually he was heading up the software division. And he had just retained one of my associates. And during our discussion that evening, he mentioned that he realized it would take up to 24 months at a minimum before they would get their first task order. I shook his hand, and I asked him if I could use him as an example of my teaching and in my speaking, because he was absolutely the first decision maker that I had run across in a long time who realized that their commitment to the federal marketplace was one that it was going to take upwards 18 to 24 months before they started to see a return on their investment. The last one that I selected for today is if you could sell business to business, you could sell business to government. Not true. It's a different animal. It's a different market. It's a complex market. It's a convoluted market. There's all kinds of policies, regulations, and as we all know, many of them change with administrations. In fact, most administrations do change many of the policies and rules and regulations. So you have to learn the marketplace. You have to learn the vocabulary, the lexicon, the nomenclature. You have to learn to talk, and of course, walk the walk. Going back to the previous bullet, the 6 months, it's like a period of due diligence. You have to go in and learn the market, learn the agencies, learn who the decision makers are, and move from there. It's not difficult. It's different. And in fact, it can be not only fun, but a heck of a lot of fun. And a lot of folks outside of government have made very, very good, long, lucrative careers as business developers selling to the federal government. Next slide, please. Sources of opportunity. Where's the gold? One of the things that a lot of folks think about in discussions about selling to the government are the contracting officers. And I put them last for a particular reason. But let me start at the top with the agencies. I mentioned a few minutes ago that you need to know who the federal departments are that you're dealing with. As an example, if you're dealing in the civilian sector, you need to know about the Department of Commerce, the Department of Justice, the Department of Agriculture, Homeland Security, GSA, etc., etc. But not only do you need to know about the departments, but you need to know about the sub-agencies within the departments. I mentioned earlier that you need to know what their programs are, whether their programs are health-oriented, environmentally oriented, safety and security oriented. What is their major focus? Know their business. Years ago, when I started my career here in town, I worked in the public utilities, and I was in management. And at the time, they had a very, very strong and aggressive union. And the first thing they did for all management was to send us off for a week of training to learn the union contract. And I remember them telling us, we want you to know more about the union contract than the employees know about the union contract. So what I'm saying to you today is I want you to know as much, if not more, about those agencies that you're targeting as those decision makers do. Know those agencies. Now, within the agencies, who's on first, what's on second? Obviously, we have a senior executive structure within the executive branch of government, and many of those senior executives are thought as to be the decision makers. Well, let me tell you, they are decision makers. And they're very powerful people within the structure and the framework of the executive branch of government. But they don't award contracts. They cannot say, I want a contract to go to vendor A versus vendor B. What they can do, however, is they can stop vendor A or vendor B from getting a contract. But let's look at the bright side. Who are the people that make the decisions? The people that make the decisions are the program managers. These are the people that have the funding. These are the people with the major initiatives. These are the people putting the new health care systems in place. These are the people putting the new national security programs in place. These are people that are putting financial management systems in place within their agencies, or enterprise-wide technology systems within their agencies. They're the ones that lobby, if you will, up the chain through the Office of OMB for their funding. They control the purse strings. Program managers, in my opinion, are the single most important person that you need to get to know in order to be successful by placing your folks within agencies. Just below that are the project managers. In the hierarchy of the federal government, they fall below program managers. One program manager could literally have dozens and sometimes hundreds of project managers. Project managers, to a lesser degree, have funding and influence. Last but not least are contracting officers. And let me point out that contracting officers have what is called a warrant. That's the authority to commit government funds. When you use the term contract officer, contract specialist interchangeably. The contract specialists do not hold warrants. Contracting officers do. In an ideal world, the program managers work hand in glove with the contracting officers to help define requirements and develop acquisition solutions. And those acquisition solutions will include which vehicles, whether it's the GSA schedule, whether it's a GWAX contracts, or whether it's full and open competition. So going back to my comment about influencing procurements, one of the things that I would encourage you to do as you start to develop relationships with executives, program managers, and project managers, get to know them and work with them defining and developing their requirements. And of course, what do we want to do? We want to define and develop requirements that your particular company can best meet, problems that you can best solve. Contracting officers are a key part of the equation, but I would strongly recommend you start with the program managers. The government offers unlimited opportunities for qualified and responsive vendors. They want to do business with you. There's no doubt about it. And as you sit there as Company X or Company Y, don't forget, I probably should put a bullet up here for this, don't forget partnering with other companies. Don't forget joint ventures. Don't forget subcontracting opportunities. Don't forget to look at other companies. What did LBJ say? Keep your friends close, so your enemy closer. Know who the competition is and establish relationships so that both of you are better positioned to compete for some of these opportunities. Next slide, please. The marketing checklist. I'm going to assume, if I may take liberty to do that you all have some type of marketing checklist within your own organization. But this is one that I put together over the years with a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And I have it in 5 basic categories. And what I'm going to do is be asking a number of questions as I go through each of these. Strategic considerations. And I'm sure you do this. What is the real essence of the job that the government is asked to be fulfilled? What is it they're doing? Does the work that the government has match up with your organizational goals and objectives? You know, there's that old saying, my name is Jimmy, I'll take anything you give me. I don't subscribe to that. I subscribe, like in staffing, getting the right people in the right jobs. We've got to make sure that we have the right opportunities that best fit our organizational goals and objectives. Is there a long-term potential within this particular government department or this particular agency or sub-agency? Is this a one-time? You often hear say, not only is it too big, but gee, this is too small. I don't want to waste all the time just putting one person in that organization. Well, we all know that once you get one person into an agency, they become your eyes and ears for you. 1 becomes 2, goes exponentially, 2 will become 4, 4 will become 8. But you have to look at the long-term potential, not only with this particular requirement at hand, but at future requirements down the road. Another question you may ask yourself, does the work significantly leverage key personnel or facilities? Meaning, do we have the right people to put in to some of these requirements that are key, that are decision makers, that will be able to influence other decisions coming down the road? Again, not only does it fit your corporate goals, but strategically, how does this position you for other opportunities later down the road? Business factors. Talked about this just a minute ago. Who is the program proponent? We're putting someone in, we're pulling a staffing requirement for a financial analyst in a budget office within the General Services Administration or within the Office of Personnel Management or Department of Commerce. Well, what program are they working on? Well, maybe they're working on a program that has just recently been initiated by the Obama administration, and we know for the most part it's going to be funded for the next 4 years. There's going to be a lot of opportunities that have yet to be defined. Or, on the flip side of the coin, is this a program that was initiated and put in place by the previous administration? And like the product life cycle, is it in decline? One of the things we have to look at is the program proponent and where it is within its own life cycle. Another thing, when I mentioned getting with the contracting officer in conjunction with the program manager to help develop acquisition plans, acquisition strategies, is who developed the statement of work? What was their acquisition approach? What was their mindset when they did this? And how stable is the funding? Again, is it a new program? Or is it a program that's been around for a while? Don't be afraid, please, to ask the question about funding. We all know that the closing, asking for the business, is the toughest part in the sales cycle. Don't be afraid to ask about funding because that will give you a lot of insight to the longevity of the program. What are some of the political aspects and how do they affect this procurement? This is a huge one. Anytime we change administrations, especially when we change parties, the philosophy at the top of the organizations often change. So are there some political components to this program? Are there some political components to staffing? And I would say the answer is probably yes and yes, particularly with this administration's focus on insourcing compared to outsourcing. A couple other things that you need to think about, and we've already talked about, at least I've touched on them briefly. Who are the decision makers? And obviously when we profile our decision makers, meaning who are they, what is their position, what are their responsibilities, make sure that we continue to nurture that relationship as we go through this marketing checklist. Another question that you may want to think about is how have you briefed the customer, or this potential customer or client? Are they fully aware of who your organization is, what your capabilities are, what your history of past performance is? We don't want to leave anything on the table, folks. We really don't. We want to make sure that they understand who you are just as much as you understand who they are. A couple of other thoughts that we always want to look at under business factors. Is there an incumbent? Is there a staffing agency that has been in there? Maybe there's a new Department of Homeland Security bid that's coming out that's going to go to a major systems integrator, and you're going to be a sub to that integrator and provide all of the labor. Well, who had that prime contract before? Is IBM you're parting with, or Northrop Grumman, or Lockheed Martin, or SRA, or SAIC? The question is, if it's an existing contract, who held it before? And then, of course, you know the ramifications of the incumbent. But the real question is, how are they viewed? How is the incumbent viewed by the current decision makers? And what are some discriminators that are going to set your company apart from the incumbent? Another factor is going to take us into our bid strategies. Do we know the competition's bid strategies? Are we in a position to bid this? Do we have teaming options? And if we do we have signed agreements with other companies for potential teaming options? A lot of things to keep in mind. You have to develop a major win theme. You have to have a winning technical approach, a winning pricing approach, a winning quality approach. It has to be a win-win. The fourth bullet, financial and contractual considerations. Can we be price competitive? If we can't, what do we have to do? Now, I did mention, obviously, lowest price doesn't always win. That is a myth. I did mention briefly best value. But can we be price competitive? Do we provide tangible added value? Are our contract terms and conditions in line with what the organization is looking for? What type of contract is it? What type of vehicle are they using? Of course, today we're thinking schedules, of course. And last but not least, performance. Can we demonstrate a strong, related experience over a history or a period of time that demonstrates we're not the newest person on the block? Do we have a good reputation with that customer? Do we have a good reputation within that agency? Do we have the required skills? Do we have a qualified project or program manager? Do we have the requisite facilities, et cetera, et cetera? What we need to do is not only meet, but exceed every requirement in that request for performance, that request for quotation. It's key. It really is. And again, I feel like I'm preaching to the choir here because these are very generic in nature, and most companies in some form or fashion already have things like this in place. Next slide, please. I just want to comment on a couple of things here. For those of you who are familiar with eBuy or not familiar with eBuy, it's an electronic system that government agencies have available to them to put up requirements under $25,000. Now, you do need a schedule to gain access to eBuy, and I would strongly recommend if you have a schedule and you're playing in this particular ballpark or arena, that you have somebody in your organization check eBuy on a daily basis to see what type of opportunities are coming out. FedBizOps, which is the online version of the old Commerce Business Daily, is for larger opportunities, $25,000 and over. And again, like eBuy, someone in your organization should be checking this. Quite frankly, eBuy is an opportunity for a quick strike. FedBizOps, if you haven't been involved earlier and it comes out in FedBizOps, the reality is you're probably already behind the curve. There probably are already companies out there that have been inside the organization talking to the decision makers, maybe even being involved in the requirements definition, and it could be too late. I'm not saying that it is in fact too late, but in all probability you may be too late. But these are two online sites that I would strongly recommend that you visit on a daily basis. Agency bid boards. These basically are hard copy bid boards. I know NIH has bid boards. A lot of the online agencies, Commerce still has some bid boards. It's not easy to get in these days to agencies without appointments and what have you, but there are some agency bid boards out there, and you may also want to check online bid boards of all the various agencies. Again, depending upon whether you're marketing to the civilian market or whether you're marketing to the defense market. Market research firms. I'm not sponsoring any of these two. I do know both of them. I've worked with both of them, but in my opinion, these are two of the top private market research firms. Input and Fed Sources. They are both subscription-based, and they track federal opportunities and slice them and dice them every way you can find possible. If you don't use private market research firms, at a minimum, I would recommend you talk to them, find out what services they have available, see if there is a good match for what your requirements are versus what they have to offer, and they will tailor their package based upon your individual needs. Also, don't forget within agencies, the Office of Small and Disadvantaged Business Utilization. And again, I apologize, I probably should have had a bullet for that one. The Office of Small and Disadvantaged Business Utilization. OSDPU is the acronym for it. All executive branch agencies have these, or I should say most of them. I haven't been to every one of them. But basically, they are charged with the goal of meeting and working with small businesses and providing them information on opportunities within their respective agencies. Get to know these folks. They have sessions. They have all kinds of opportunities for small business people to come in collectively as well as individually. It's imperative that you get to know them. A lot of folks have a lot of different opinions on them. I do know folks that have gone and tried to work that segment of the market to no avail. But then again, I know people who happen to walk in and be at the right place at the right time. So as you start to put together your toolbox, I would say add to your toolbox the Office of Small and Disadvantaged Business Utilization. Next slide, please. Where everybody knows my name. This reminds me of Cheers, one of my favorite sitcoms, and it's not on anymore. Conferences, trade shows, expos, breakfast, dinners, lunch, charity events, parties, you name it, be there. Be there and be visible. Let's start with conferences. There's a couple of conferences that I want to mention today that I have found valuable not only to the federal decision maker, but to the private sector as well. And they are in no particular order. Let me mention GSA Expo. GSA Expo is an annual event. They move it between the West Coast, Midwest, and West Coast. This year, May 4th through 10th, it's in Orlando, Florida. It's GSA's largest training expo. GSA has two major components, the Public Building Service and the Federal Acquisition Service. The Federal Acquisition Service is hugely represented. People from GSA are there. These are buyers that buy everything from pencils and pens to automobiles to airplanes to fire trucks to desks to information technologies and, of course, staffing. I would strongly recommend, to the extent that you can afford it within your budgetary constraints, to send someone to GSA Expo. Whether you have a booth or not is a whole different issue. That's an internal decision, I understand. But it's a huge conference, a huge turnout, and it's an opportunity for education. There's no doubt about it. One of my favorites in the private sector is AFCEA, AFCEA, and that's the Armed Forces Communications and Electronics Association. Kind of forget the full name. They go by their acronym today, AFCEA. They have chapters and affiliates throughout the country. They have a number, throughout the world. Let me back up. I participate in the Bethesda chapter in Washington, Montgomery County, and that focuses on the civilian side of government. The defense side has meetings in Northern Virginia, in the Tysons Corner area. And they put on some excellent breakfasts, all-day events, and they always bring in speakers from government, high-level government speakers, obviously to talk about and promote and develop relationships for their programs. Tremendous opportunities, not only to be informed, but to meet and greet. And quite frankly, as I like to say, and I'm not too proud of this, there tends to be the usual suspects at many of these conferences. But then again, it tends to be the usual suspects that have the Rolodexes and gain access to the federal decision makers. The American Council for Technology, known as ACT, or the Industrial Advisory Council, known as IAC. IAC is another very, very good trade association to become affiliated with. They sponsor a number of events throughout the year, but they have two large conferences each year, one called the Management of Change and the other one called the Executive Leadership Conference. They're both coming up shortly. These are AFCEA and IAC are two great organizations. You can check them out online, and I know Emily has information for them available to you. But I would strongly consider, at a minimum, taking a look at them and maybe going to one or two events as a guest to get the flavor of these events and see whether or not you believe it would be worth the return on your investment. Last but not least is the National Contract Management Association, NCMA. This brings together annually at their government contracting conference decision makers from throughout government on both the defense and the civilian side. And it's, as many of them are, it's very educational and very informative and a very good opportunity to networking. And this is what we're talking about when we say where everybody knows my name, where we can meet people, where we can greet people, where we can where we can exchange business cards, where we can look for opportunities within federal agencies, where we can look for opportunities to partner, look for opportunities to become either a prime or a sub, where it's a win-win for everybody. Obviously, many of these trade shows and conferences are in vertical markets, the healthcare market, which we know is it's already exploded, let me say that. The defense market, which has been and continues to be huge. the Homeland Security market, the environmental market. They have a lot of different conferences and expos that are vertically oriented. Breakfasts, lunches, dinners. If you can see me, you know that I like to eat. But I also like to meet people, and the reason I like the breakfast, lunches, and dinners, they tend to be more informal, more quaint, if I can use that word. And you have an opportunity to bring together people of your choice. You can make an invite. You can invite me to attend. I can invite you to attend. You can sort of orchestrate who the players are going to be at the table as compared to, unfortunate conferences and trade shows. You don't always have that luxury. I do know that in the Washington area, and I'm sure it's true around the country, we have a number of golf tournaments, charity events for the Ronald McDonald House, silent auctions, a number of things. We have a number of award and recognition banquets that recognize decision makers both in government and in private industry. And I would recommend that wherever you're located, if you're inside the Beltway or outside the Beltway, and again, depending upon whether your focus is on the defense community or the civilian community or both, we know that the government is in every state. We know that there's military bases throughout the country. We know the Department of Interior is throughout the country with all the land that they manage. GSA is in 11 regions. HUD is in 11 regions. The Department of Justice is in 11 regions. So the opportunities to develop relationships and work with people in government are not just focused in Washington. They are all over the area. And in closing, I'm checking my time. I don't know how I did, Emily, but let me turn it back over to you and for any questions that the folks may have.
All right. Thank you so much, Rick. As a reminder, you may ask a question through the web conference system. Simply type your question into the Q&A panel on the right side of your screen. We have had a few questions come in, so we'll go ahead and get started. The first one, you mentioned this on the slide we just covered at the beginning of your discussion. What is the name of the two market research organizations that you mentioned?
The market research firms, the private market research firms?
Yes, please.
Input, INPUT, and Fed Sources. It's FED and then capital SOURCES, Fed Sources.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I am going to chat that out to everybody on the webinar so everyone has access to that question. I'll also be able to, like Rick mentioned, in your emails that will follow up this webinar, I will include links to the websites that Rick has been speaking about on the previous slide. Okay, next question that has come in. Can you review the list of networking events?
The list that I just gave of networking events. First is, like I used the GSA Expo. That's the one that this year will be May 4th through May 10th in Orlando. The second one I mentioned was AFCEA, and it's AFCEA. Again, they tend to go by their acronym. And that is a worldwide organization. And it focuses both on the defense community as well as the civilian community. And I know they have a number of seminars and events on a regular basis throughout the country. Very big in Washington, very big in the, and I didn't mention this, in the Denver, Colorado area and in the San Diego area. And then the last, and I think I mentioned, the third one I mentioned was IAC, and let me just stick with IAC, the Industry Advisory Council. That is another large nationwide trade association. And while they do focus on technology, folks from all facets of government are members of and attend their events. They have one called the Management of Change that comes up, I believe, in May or June. I don't have that right in front of me. And I do know that in October they have an executive leadership conference, and that is absolutely outstanding, ELC. It's one of my favorites. And I mentioned the National Contract Management Association. This is one where you would get the opportunity to rub shoulders with a lot of contracting and acquisition folks from government. Now, I say government, they have like a government sector within NCMA. They do a lot of other things, of course, in the private sector, but they do have a government component, and they have an annual conference. Those were the four I believe I mentioned.
Excellent, thank you. And as a reminder, this program is recorded today, and you will all receive a complimentary copy of that recording. So you'll be able to review that portion and write down more thoroughly all of the great resources that Rick is giving us today. So next question that has come in. What does the ideal B2G candidate look like?
The ideal candidate. You know, I get that question a lot. And quite frankly, there is really no ideal candidate. But what I would like to do would be to sort of profile, I would think, the candidate that would have the highest probability of success. Number one, you need somebody who knows and understands government. To the extent that you have the funding to invest, get someone who has worked for the government, worked inside the government. Now, not necessarily somebody that's been there 20, 30 years and retired, but somebody who has worked inside the government, somebody who understands how the government works, how budgets are put together, how agencies interact with OMB, how they interact with OMB, the Office of Management and Budget, OPM, the Office of Personnel Management. So how agencies can get their authorizations for their funding and their FTEs, their full-time equivalencies, which are their staffing requirements. The ideal candidate would know the interworkings of the government. The ideal candidate would have a Rolodex. They would know people in government. They would feel very confident walking into a government meeting and sitting down one-on-one with a senior executive, or like happened to me many times where I thought I had a one-on-one only to be escorted up the elevator a couple floors to a meeting with 10, 15, 20 people. They have to be very confident. They have to be good speakers. I would say they have to be good on one-on-one interpersonal skills, as well as good on their feet in front of folks. As amenable and as much as the government wants to work with the private sector, the reality of it is there are folks within government that like to make our work a little more challenging for us. So a few hurdles out there and a few hoops for us to jump through. But it's a full-time position. I would recommend any of you folks who've had your successes in the commercial environment, if you're looking for an ideal candidate, I would strongly recommend that you commit resources to a full-time business developer. Now, I know from my relationships with staffing companies I've had in the past and currently, many commercial staff companies, to my understanding, you folks have these matrices in place where you have to make X number of calls, et cetera, visits, et cetera, et cetera. I understand that and I respect that. But B2G, that doesn't always work. A lot of times you spend time at breakfasts in the morning, and then after 2 or 3 people leave, you have to spend another half hour, 45 minutes. You have to be a good manager of your time. You have to remember it doesn't start at 8 o'clock and end at 4 o'clock. You've got to be available to travel. That's pretty much it. You've got to know and understand the internal workings of the government. And, of course, you've got to know your product as far as that goes without saying. But you've got to be able to work with the government and understand the buying process. I believe you all read it separately. You got to understand the FAR. You got to know the federal acquisition regulations inside of that. You've got to know all the vehicles that are available, not only the schedules but the GWACs. You have to understand how full and open competition works. So we're talking about understanding the internal workings of the government, the federal acquisition regulations, whatever it is that you're selling to the government, and realizing that the company, the owners, the managers, the executives have to be willing to make a commitment, and I'm going to say 18 to 24 months at a minimum before they can expect to see a return on their investment.
Great, thank you. And also, just as Rick mentioned, the federal acquisition regulations, we just did a webinar on that. That was number 2 in the series. So if you do need some more information about that, you can reach out to ASA and we can explain the previous webinars in the series that will help clarify any questions you have on those particular items. So great, our next question has come in. If you were starting out selling into GSA now, knowing what you know now, what is the first step you would take? Would you knock on doors?
Well, the first thing I would do, it sounds like I'm selling insurance now. I'd work my network. I'd find out who's on first, what's on second. I'd look around my neighborhood. My sense is everybody's a suspect before we even get to a prospect, quite frankly. You never know who knows someone. So I would work my Rolodex that I currently have, and I would work my network. I would also, within the context of our marketing plan for our organization and the agency we're going to market, I would go on their website and find out if they're having any events, any conferences, any seminars, any bidding conferences, anything like that that's open to the public or open to the vendor community, and I would attend those. I would get to conferences, and then I would also, again, doing my homework, get a copy to the extent you can of the attendee list, and if you're focusing on HUD, meet the people from HUD. If you're focusing on agriculture, go meet the people from agriculture. It's not a serial process. It is absolutely a multifaceted, parallel process. It's a convoluted equation, and like I said, it doesn't happen overnight. But I would start with my network and who I know.
Excellent, thank you. Looks like we have time for one, maybe two more questions. First question, it sounds like to me that it's who you know more than anything else. Does that present some potential conflict of interest issues or, at a minimum, create the perception of conflict of interest?
Let me just think through this real quick. Number one, could it potentially? The answer is yes. And the perception. Perception is real big in the Washington area. I'm sure it is everywhere else. But the bottom line is the government has a very strict code of ethics. All government employees, at least decision makers, I shouldn't say all, I don't like absolutes, but the bottom line is all decision makers go through an annual ethics program, and they know what they can do and what they can't do. In Washington, D.C., we have a very simple rule that we live by. Would you want whatever you're doing to appear on the front page of the Washington Post tomorrow? And if the answer is no, then don't do it. It's a very simple litmus test. The government has rules and regulations regarding how much a government employee can take from a vendor. They have dollar amounts like no more than $25 at one time or over $50 or $100 a year. My sense is that when you're out there working with folks, meeting with folks, if you are at a breakfast, you are at lunch, you can always offer to pick up the tab. And if they allow you to pick up the tab, they're going to say, next time it's on me, and acknowledge that. But I wouldn't be going out there handing out a lot of specialty marketing things and advertising initially. Reserve that for your booths and conferences. Be up front with them. Be forward with them. And like I said, don't do anything that you wouldn't want to see on the front page of the newspaper tomorrow. You should be okay.
All right, great. Thank you so much. That is all we have time for today. Do you have any closing remarks for our attendees?
Yes, again, Emily, I want to thank you and Trace and all the folks at ASA for the opportunity this afternoon. But in particular, I'd like to thank all those folks who stayed tuned through the hour and took their valuable time and patience to listen to the presentation. And I hope it was of value for them. And I want to tell you I had fun and look forward to seeing you folks again soon.
Thank you so much again, Rick. This concludes our webinar today. Remember, if you have attended this live webinar today or viewed this webinar as a course on ASA Pro, you can take an online quiz to earn an electronic certificate of completion. If you have not already registered to take this quiz, send an email to asa@csp.tsc@americanstaffing.net to be registered and for more information. So go take that quiz right now and good luck. We did have a few unanswered questions during today's webinar, so we will be in touch. Rick will answer these few questions for us and be in touch with those attendees within 2 weeks. Also, within 2 weeks, you will receive a link to the recording of this webinar to view again and share with your colleagues. If you have earned the Certified Staffing Professional or Technical Services Certified designation, this program qualifies for 1 active continuing education credit towards recertification. To submit your CE, just visit the ASA Pro homepage at americanstaffing.net/ASA Pro. From the homepage, click on the My Account quick link in the gray box on the right. Enter your email address into the correct login area and click on CE Submission Form under My Account. This way you can submit your hours directly to ASA with no paperwork. Within a couple of hours, you can expect an email from ASA inviting you to evaluate today's program. The email will be sent to the person who registered for the event, but we ask that you forward the email and the survey link to anyone who participated with you today. Your feedback will help ASA develop the best educational programming possible. We thank you for joining us, and we especially thank Rick for presenting today's ASA Pro webinar.